April 8th, 1943. 27,000 feet above the gray spring clouds of northern France, laughter drifted through an oxygen mask. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermansen of Jägerschwader 26 watched the strange shapes climbing slowly toward his formation. Barrel-bodied newcomers whose heavy propellers flashed in the Sunday, flying milk bottles, he radioed, amused by the awkward silhouettes of the American P-47 Thunderbolts, making their first combat appearance over occupied Europe. To the veterans of the Luftwaffe, the massive Republic fighters looked absurd, too large, too slow, too clumsy to threaten Germany's sleek Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts. What none of them realized in that crystalline morning air was that they were witnessing the arrival of a machine that would rewrite the logic of aerial war. In less than 2 years, the laughter would vanish, replaced by the dull terror of 8 synchronized Browning, 50 caliber guns. The P-47 Thunderbolt would become the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war, the embodiment of American industrial power and battlefield pragmatism, a weapon built not for elegance but for endurance, firepower, and domination of the high sky. This is the story of how mockery turned to fear, how industry defeated experience, and how a flying milk bottle became the hammer that shattered the Luftwaffe. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was born not from elegance but from panic. In June 1940, as German fighters swept through France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received an urgent directive from the U.S. Army Air Corps: build a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best. What emerged on his drawing board was a behemoth that defied every convention of fighter design. It will be a dinosaur, Kartveli admitted, but a dinosaur with good proportions. The prototype XP-47B first flew on May 6, 1941. At nearly 10,000 pounds empty, it outweighed most bombers of the previous war. A labyrinth of ducts snaked through its fuselage, feeding the massive turbo supercharger that would allow its 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp engine to breathe at 30,000 feet. The aircraft's appearance stunned test pilots. "Does this thing even fly?" one asked. It did, and at altitude it was unstoppable. Where German engines gasped for oxygen, the Double Wasp delivered sea-level power in the stratosphere, turning weight into an advantage and drag into armor. The Thunderbolt's road to combat, however, was paved with tragedy. At Bridgeport, Connecticut, the 56th Fighter Group under Major Hubert Hub Zemke lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft to training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 ground-looped on takeoff, torque rolled without warning, and dived with such enthusiasm that its controls locked under compressibility, an aerodynamic phenomenon few pilots yet understood. "The Jug kills more Americans in training than Germans ever will," one mechanic muttered. Yet those who mastered it discovered a revelation. Lieutenant Robert Johnson remembered his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. When the 4th and 56th Fighter Groups entered combat in April 1943, their reputation plummeted as quickly as their aircraft. German aces of Jägerschwader 26 derided the Thunderbolt as a lumbering target. "It turns like a freight train and climbs like a pregnant cow," scoffed Josef Pipspriller. The statistics supported the insult: 14 American losses for only 3 confirmed kills in their first month. Even the RAF, watching from sleek Spitfires, suggested the Americans reconsider their choice of mount. But beneath the ridicule, something extraordinary was happening. Pilots returning from missions brought home aircraft perforated by cannon fire, oil-soaked, riddled with holes, yet still flying. The big radial engine, lacking fragile coolant lines, shrugged off punishment that would have destroyed a liquid-cooled fighter. Zemke began to see the machine's true nature. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight, your power, your guns. Thus was born the Thunderbolt doctrine: boom and zoom warfare built on momentum, altitude, and devastating bursts from 8 50 caliber Brownings. What began as a design experiment became a philosophy. Survive the first mistake, strike from advantage, and let brute force decide what finesse could not. The flying milk bottle was about to prove that in an industrial war, mass and math could kill just as surely as artistry. The turning point came on June 26th, 1943, high above Le Touquet, France. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron found himself trapped inside a burning P-47, his canopy jammed by cannon shrapnel, his face bleeding from fragments of glass and steel. For the Luftwaffe pilots diving upon him, it was an easy kill. The crippled Thunderbolt shuddered under more than 200 impacts from 4 20mm cannon and twin machine guns. Yet somehow, it refused to die. Johnson coaxed the dying engine toward the English coast, smoke trailing behind like a funeral banner. Then, impossibly, a lone Focke-Wulf 190 appeared, riddling the battered jug with the last of its ammunition before pulling alongside. Through the cracked canopy, Johnson saw the German pilot's disbelief. The enemy saluted and broke away. Against every law of aerodynamics and luck, the P-47 limped home. Its crew chief stopped counting bullet holes at 200. That single flight transformed ridicule into respect. In the following months, the Thunderbolt's reputation hardened. Major Zemke's men learned to exploit the fighter's immense weight and energy. Instead of turning duels, they attacked from the heights boom and zoom, diving at nearly 550 miles per hour, firing short, lethal bursts, then climbing away before the enemy could react. Hit once, climb and come again, Zemke drilled. In a dive, no German aircraft could follow. In a climb, the P-47's turbo, supercharged Double Wasp, pulled it clear of pursuit. What had been a liability became the core of an American doctrine. Control the vertical, own the fight. The lesson reached full expression on August 17th, 1943, during the twin raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest daylight strike yet attempted. Over the French countryside, Major David Schilling led his squadron of Thunderbolts into a formation of twin-engine Messerschmitt, 110 seconds preparing to attack the B-17 bombers. They came down like hammers from heaven, recalled a surviving German gunner. We hit one and it didn't even flinch. Then it fired. The aircraft ahead of us became nothing, just fragments in the air. In less than a minute, 18 German fighters were gone. The devastation was mathematical. 8 Browning, 50 caliber guns, each firing at 750 rounds per minute, delivered 3,400 bullets in a single engagement, over 6,000 rounds per minute of combined firepower. At convergence range, the bullets formed a 6-foot sphere of destruction. Anything entering that space simply ceased to exist. German pilots, who once mocked the flying milk bottle, now called it der Donnerschlag, the thunderclap. By autumn 1943, Luftwaffe intelligence began to whisper the unthinkable. The P-47 was superior above 25,000 feet. When Colonel Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most decorated aces with 206 victories, attempted to intercept a bomber stream near Bremen on October 8th, his F-190 gasped for oxygen at altitude. P-47 seconds of the 56th Fighter Group struck from 32,000 feet. Robert Johnson fired a single deflection burst. Phillips' aircraft exploded in midair. The laughter of spring was gone. From that summer onward, the sound of 8 Brownings echoing through the thin stratosphere became the new law of the European sky. By early 1944, the Thunderbolt had evolved into a predator. The arrival of the P-47D-22, with its immense Hamilton Standard paddle blade propeller, transformed the aircraft's behavior. Each of the 13-foot blades bit into the air like an axe into wood, turning horsepower into instant acceleration. Climb rate jumped from a sluggish 2,200 feet per minute to nearly 3,000, matching the vaunted German fighters at most altitudes. Even its voice changed. The new propeller tips approached the speed of sound, producing a deep, rolling thunder audible from miles away. German ground troops learned to recognize it, the ominous Donnerschlag thunderclap, and froze instinctively when they heard it. For Luftwaffe pilots, the realization was worse. The fat Americans have learned to climb, wrote veteran Heinz Noack after a February 1944 engagement near Hanover. We laughed when we saw them rise to meet us. 30 seconds later, Schmidt was gone, nothing but smoke. The P-47's ungainly form was now a symbol of inevitability. When the Allies launched the invasion of Normandy on June 6th, 1944, more than 500 Thunderbolts filled the sky above the beaches. German attempts to penetrate the umbrella met annihilation. 50 caliber firepower, but also bombs and high-velocity rockets. Each D-25 variant could haul a pair of 1,000-pound bombs and 10 5-inch HVAR rockets, the punch of a medium bomber delivered with the accuracy of a rifle. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski called the experience like holding the hammer of God. German panzer divisions discovered that armor was no protection. A 2-second burst from 8 Brownings could shred a truck column, while a single rocket strike could obliterate a tank platoon. In June alone, Thunderbolts destroyed more than 500 tanks, nearly 4,000 trucks, and 650 locomotives. Entire rail networks vanished beneath smoke and fire. German soldiers coined a grim diagnosis. Jabo, fever fighter, bomber fever, a physical illness brought on by the mere sound of approaching thunderbolts. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without flinching now dove for cover at the first echo of the R-2800's growl. The P-47's power reached far beyond Europe. In the Pacific, Colonel Neil Kirby's 348th Fighter Group proved that the same brute strength suited jungle heat and endless ocean. Over New Guinea, Japanese ace Saburo Sakai watched his cannon shells ricochet off the Thunderbolt's armored skin. "We called them monsters," he wrote later. "Our weapons seemed useless. Their return fire tore aircraft apart." The later P-47 Newton's variant, with extended wet wings and 2,350-mile range, would escort B-29 seconds to Japan itself. From the hedgerows of Normandy to the volcanic islands of the Pacific, the thunder was everywhere, and it was American. "The sky belongs to the Americans," reported Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer, one of only 3 German pilots to return from his unit's dawn sortie. "They were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain." The Jug's transformation from interceptor to fighter-bomber completed its legend. By mid-1944, the 9th Air Force's P-47 seconds carried not just, when a captured German pilot sneered, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking pointed toward the horizon where replacement aircraft were already arriving. "By tomorrow," he said quietly, "we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" Within 48 hours, fresh P-47D 40 seconds filled the flight line. The Luftwaffe lost over 200 aircraft and as many irreplaceable men. America replaced its losses in a day. Germany never recovered. Behind that scene lay a machine far greater than any airplane. Industrial America. Republic Aviation built 15,683 Thunderbolts, one every hour at the height of production. Each required 65,000 parts, 8 miles of wiring, and the labor of men and women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor. The Lake City Arsenal produced 30 million rounds of 50 caliber ammunition per month. The refineries of Texas and the shipyards of New Jersey sent oceans of fuel across the Atlantic. While Germany counted gallons, America counted tankers. Pilot training reflected the same logic of abundance. By 1944, the United States graduated 30,000 pilots annually, more than Germany trained in the entire war. Each American entered combat with 400 flight hours. His German counterpart, barely 100. The result was visible in every dogfight. "It wasn't even fair," remembered Lieutenant Eugene Roberts. "We knew our systems, our tactics, our enemy. They were brave but tired, undertrained, and outnumbered." German commanders understood the inevitability. "They lose 10, they build 20, lamented Joseph Pips. Priller in 1945. "We lose 1, and he is gone forever." Even Adolf Galland, once the proud architect of the Luftwaffe's fighter arm, admitted after the war, "We laughed at the Thunderbolt because we thought it was clumsy. We didn't understand that it was American, built for production, power, and survival." The lesson was unmistakable. Strategy built on courage alone could not stand against a nation that turned industry itself into a weapon. By the spring of 1945, the Luftwaffe existed mostly on paper. Fuel was gone, veterans were dead, and new pilots went into combat with barely 30 hours of flight time. Those who survived long enough to meet the P-47 understood terror in its purest form. Jabo fever, fighter-bomber fever, became a medical term in German reports, describing the trembling and nausea that seized soldiers and airmen at the mere sound of the Thunderbolt's engines. The deep growl of the R-2800 had become the voice of inevitability. In little more than 2 years, mockery had turned into silence. The flying milk bottle, that once struggled to climb over France, now ruled every altitude from the beaches of Normandy to the skies over Leipzig. Its statistics told a story almost beyond comprehension. Over 3,700 German aircraft destroyed in the air, more than 3,000 on the ground, tens of thousands of locomotives, trucks, and tanks reduced to wreckage. Behind those numbers stood the same truth that defined the entire American war effort: discipline, production, and an understanding that quantity could become a form of quality. After the guns fell silent, former enemies finally met. At a 1985 reunion in Phoenix, General Adolf Galland recalled his first post-war flight in a captured P-47. It climbed as if it were falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable, the power endless. I realized then that we never had a chance. Another German veteran described the 8 Brownings as Roosevelt's piano, the rhythmic roar of 50 caliber fire that played the requiem of the Luftwaffe. Today, a restored P-47D sits beneath the lights of the U.S. Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. Its aluminum skin gleams, its 8 gun barrels dark and silent. Beside it, a strip of gun camera film shows a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating midair, and a small placard carries an unnamed pilot's final words. We laughed when we first saw them. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you and you ceased to exist. The laughter of 1,943 died long ago, but the thunder remains a reminder that in war, endurance is as decisive as genius, and that power, when disciplined by purpose, can change the very sound of the sky. Their courage built the world we inherited. Subscribe to WW2 Tales, Legacy of Heroes, and share your thoughts below about what true heroism means to you today.